A very good morning, good evening to all of you. So today we are going to conduct or we are going to have a session around very interesting topic. As you can see, we are going to utilize a public data set, which is nothing but bot SV1. So without a further ado, we will get started. So as you can see in the PowerPoint slide, so this will be entirely our focus throughout our workshop. So we are going to use Splunk. We have already ingested a data set, what we have called bot SV1. It's available on the GitHub page as well. So what we are going to do is we are going to find the information using Splunk as a tool. So whatever the information we find and or we can call it as indicator of attacks, uh, and we are going to categorize or we are going to put it into the one of the phase of the cyber kill chain, as you can see in the PowerPoint slide. So we'll start with the reconnaissance and we will end at action on objectives, right? So uh, so this particular workshop is going to help will make sure that you have a very good skill set with respect to the Splunk, as well as you have a very good skill set with respect to analyzing the logs from the different data sets or different data sources, right? So the very first slide talks about what kind of the data sources or what kind of the events do we have in this particular data set. So as you can see in this particular slide, right? So there are many data sources which are getting ingested into this particular data set. This data set is static, and so here is the scenario, right? So there is a one particular fictional company which has already been attacked and website has already been defaced, right? So this is the scenario, right? The website for this particular organization has already been defaced, and so this is website corresponding to our organization or our company. So we know the host name or we know the uh, fully qualified domain name or our website itself, right? So we have that information, and then there are certain artifact or a certain post has been left by an attacker, right? So we will start from here. So as the very first slide talks about what is the likely IP address of someone from this particular group. So we have seen this in the screenshot which has already been left, and you can see the URL of the website, which is nothing but I am really not batman.com. So now we are going to get started with our web console, and we will try to look what are the different data sources we should be looking at to find some of the information. So there are certain hints. First of all, we should basically look at what are the source types or the data that has already been ingested into this particular data set, right? So we'll be looking at source IP addresses. We will also be looking at different source types, and let's see what do we find with respect to that. So again, this is our console. So anyways, we are going to navigate to our console. So this is just we are basically drawing we are navigating into the console, and we are able to see that there are two source IP addresses, which is basically requesting or to this particular web page. And so this particular page basically talks about what we have seen in our wired data or our stream data. So what we are able to find with respect to our intrusion detection system, right? So we are also trying to understand about the signatures or the classification that is being done at the backend by our IDS, which is nothing but Suricata, right? So all the logs from the Suricata are also getting ingested into the Splunk. Okay, so let me navigate into our console. So source type is equal to, so as I said, we are using a static data set, and so therefore I will be making the use of all time. So before we get started, just wanted to let all of us know what are the different sources of the data we have had in this particular data set. So by result dot source type. So just wanted to make sure that what do we see in this particular static data set, right? So in a moment, so you can see that these are the source types from which the data is getting ingested into the RSIM platform. So since we are getting just started, so as we already know what is the website, so for example, so this is the host name for us, and so first of all, we just wanted to know what is the what are the data sources. We do see data corresponding to this particular website, right? So here you can see that we do find data into the stream.http. We also find data into the suricata. We also have some kind of the data or logs ingested into the IIS. Okay. So what we can do is, let's make a note of these particular data sources which we will be using. So just give me a sec. So suricata is one of them, and stream HTTP is also one of them. So these are the sources. So let's first of all see what we can see in this particular source type. So here, and this particular website name. So we'll be making the use of the verbose mode for the investigation for the time being. So now we have the website. We also explicitly mentioned that what is the source type we are interested in as of now. So let's scroll down, and we would be interested in what is the source IP that is basically requesting to this particular website, right? So if I scroll down further, so you can see the request is basically being made from two source IP addresses, and these particular IP addresses are external in nature, right? So let's just make a note of these IP address for the time being, and the second one as well. Okay. So we can also use a rare command, or we can also use top command in order to look at your depending on the scenario, whether the requests being made are very less as compared to in general, or there are extremely large amount of the requests being made to this particular sites, right? So now so we looked at the stream data as of now. So we know that what are the source IP addresses that are basically making the request to these particular this particular website. So now we will be making the use of suricata as a source. So we wanted to know, so for example, let's say if we can make a use of this particular source IP. So result.src IP is equal to this one. So let's say we are trying to validate from the signatures, we are trying to make the check on the reputation of this particular IP address with the help of our intrusion detection system. So I have already made this particular field as the selected fields. So we'll be making the use of this result.signature. So if you don't have this particular field, you can always go to the, click on more fields. And here, if you can type signature, so I have already check marked against this particular field. So it is basically showing me at the very top under these selected fields, right? So if I click on this, you can see that there are certain signatures which basically shows us, if you can read through, possible cross-site scripting attempts, SQL injection attempts. So what we are able to guess from what we see in the console is, the reputation of this particular IP address is looking bad, right? It's looking malicious, so it could be the scanner which is basically scanning our website, or something of that sort. Okay. So now we have collected our source IP address. We also know what we can see in our data source. What our IDS is basically saying with respect to this particular IP address. Okay. So at the same time, we also wanted to make sure, we wanted to know to which particular destination IP this particular request is being made, right? So we will look into that as well, right? So for example, if I again look into the stream data, HTTP and the source IP, let's not make use of the source IP as of now. As I would suggest, we'll be looking at the destination IP. We wanted to see where this, but so we can do one thing. We can make use of this particular source IP, right? So sorry about that. CIP is equal to. So we have seen that there are basically two external IPs which are making the request to our websites. So now we already know these are the source IPs. So we are basically trying to identify what is the destination IP these particular source IPs are requesting to. So you can see that majority of the requests are being made to this particular destination IP. Okay, so we will also make a record of this particular address as well. So let's call it as dest IP is equal to. So we looked at some of the sources of surrogate and stream HTTP. We basically look at some of the source IP which is generating majority of the web requests to our website. We also identified the destination IP. So we are basically collecting this particular data as of now. So this is what we are trying to see, what are the requests that are being made to our website, right? So we have identified this particular source IP addresses, right? So the next thing what we can do is we will try to gather a little more information, and we will navigate or we will drill down to some of the fields which you are looking at in the slide as of now, user agent. And we will also be looking at the source headers. Okay, so let's get back to that. Okay, so now what I can do is I can also explicitly mention our dest IP. So it will take a moment. And so as we looked into our slides, we would like to see what we can find out into the source headers, or let's say user agent, right? So it will take a minute to complete this particular search. So the data is extremely large, the 11 GB of data. It might take a while, it might take a minute. Yeah, so I was talking about user agents. And so for example, this is the user agent, right? So the very first two entries, you can see it's quite normal, it's legitimate. So this is how you basically see the record of user agents, when the request is coming from the most known web browsers. But however, if you have a look at a little down, you can see some of the user agents. So for example, you have something like a QNetX, right? So if you Google this particular term, you will get to know that it is one of the web vulnerability security scanners, right? So you can see that somebody is trying to make the use of this QNetX in order to scan this particular website, right? So we can also record this particular data, right? What we can see in the user agent. So in a moment, let's also take an opportunity to look at the source headers. So if I look at the source headers, you can again see QNetX web vulnerability scanner, right? So we have some of the information to start with, and we are documenting every piece of information as and when we are finding these kind of the hints by looking at in our SIM platform, right? So let's mention what we see here. I will just make a note of this. QNetX. Okay. So what else can we find? So I will again go back to our slide. So we are also trying to understand there, and there are some other questions which we are interested in, right? So for example, since this is a website, right, so there might be a possibility that these websites are basically making use of the content management platforms as well, right? So we will be making the use of certain other fields, like we also already looked at destination IP for that matter, and we have documented that. We looked at the source types, HTTP stream, surrogate, and IIS. We can also make a use of the status, because mostly we would like to have a look at the requests, which are successful. So for example, we can basically make a use of status is equal to 200. We have also looked at the URI. So let's also look at the URI, what it basically leads us to. Okay. So in this particular slide, you can see that obviously we have identified the destination IP address. We are trying to look at the URI as a field, and you can see some of the entries like Joomla, which is one of the content management, CMS platform, you can say, right? So this is the very answer to the question which we have flagged earlier, right? And of course, so obviously you can run this particular search, so what are the successful requests that is basically being made to this particular website. So now, so we are at the end of the very first phase, right? So all the information which we have found so far, and we'll be putting into the reconnaissance phase, right? So you can see that we have found the IP, which is basically scanning our website. So we mentioned that particular IP address 40.80 dot something something, right? We also find that the attacker is basically making the use of web vulnerability scanner, which is nothing but a QNetX. We also know what is the destination IP to the request is being made to, right? So we mentioned that particular IP address as well, right? So this is the first phase of the kill chain. Let's us move on to the another phase. So we will start from this. So we will also be looking at some other data sources, and we will try to answer this very question, that where a brute force attack originated from, right? So again, we are looking at, as you can see, we are looking at stream data or wired data. So we already identified these two particular external IP addresses as our source IPs. Then we also know the destination IP address. We can refine that particular search as well. We can explicitly mention our HTTP method as post if somebody is trying to brute force against our website in order to crack the password of the website, right? So this particular request will be most probably be post. So they will be making the use of post request there. So so this is the one of the field which might give you some information, right? So anyways, we are again going to uh, get into the Splunk web console, right? So again, we are here. So what we have got as of now, right? So we have the source IP, we have the destination IP, and since we talked about the post request, let's mention that as well. HTTP method. So we only want post as of now. At the same time, we also want to look at the request, all the requests or the brute force attempts, in order to crack the password, right? So let's go one particular step further. So we also want to specify form data is equal to, let's say, okay, and let's see what we can find here, right? Something is wrong, I guess. So result dot HTTP method is equal to post, and just give me a sec. So would like to see first what is basically being captured in one of the fields, which might lead us to our next step. So basically trying to look here. So let's make use of this particular field. Just give me a sec. Yeah, so what happens is, basically we are trying to look at, since we are trying to identify the brute force attempts, right? So definitely we are not sure. So we do know that one of the external IP address which is trying to scan our website, but we are not sure at this particular point in time, right? So I will remove this particular field. Yeah, so I think now we are able to see much larger results, and we are interested in the form field, and we will try to see what's basically getting captured in this field, right? So you can see that, if you look at this very field, password is equal to Earther, Big Daddy, Blazer. So all these particular passwords are getting tried in order to compromise the login credentials of the user in our website, right? So we know that, and the better way of looking at this is we can also make use of regular expressions, by the way. So let's say field is equal to, we are looking in result dot form data is equal to double quotes, and would be good if I look at one of the form fields. So password, and I think, just give me a sec. So you can see the password is equal to, right? So password is equal to, here would say user password. Hopefully it will give us results, and count by user password, right? Yeah, I think it has given me some results. So you can see that these are all the passwords which are basically getting tried in order to crack the successful password, right? So basically they are trying to guess the password. So you can also we would say sort minus count, and we would also like to see what are the source IP addresses, right? So for example, src IP, just give me a sec, result dot. So if I ran this search, it will take a moment. Yeah, so you can see that, we have seen the count of, so all these particular attempts are being made, but we are not sure whether it is successful or not. So we can see that all the passwords or all the post requests, in order to crack the correct, or in order to guess the correct password, are coming from the external IP, which is starting from 23.22 dot something something. So at the same time, the very first the user password, you can see Batman. it has two corresponding counts against that, and you can also see the source IP address, 23 dot something, as well as the another IP address, right? So we will try to see, it might be the possibility that the attacker has already accomplished its his purpose by cracking the successful password, and and subsequently he's trying to log in into this particular website with the correct password from the different external IP. So this could be the possibility as well. So I think we have uncovered some of the questions of what we looked at the slide. So let me go back to the slide once again. So we are looking at the form data. We are looking at what is the username and password. So attacker is trying to guess the password. Then we have captured what might be looking like a correct password. And then we are able to see that particular request or that very user password is basically used from the external IP, right? So it might be the potential sign of the compromise as well, login credential compromise as well. So we will try to run this particular search. So I think the previous search, what we look at in our Splunk Web Console, right? It is very, very clear that all the requests, you can see all the requests that is coming from 23.22, right? So if I make this particular 50 per page, I think we should be able to see. So you can see that all the brute force request that is basically coming from the very IP address which you can see on the screen as of now. Okay. Yeah, so you can definitely add time as one of the filters, so that is not a problem at all, right? What was the first? Yeah, so you can make a use of head. You can make a limit of you can basically look at what is the first 10 password attempts. So this is just a matter of you knowing the SPL very well, right? Or SPL syntax or commands. So again, I think this is what we looked at in our web console. So I think now we know that this is the correct password, and it basically leads us to the potential compromise of login credentials already. Yeah, you can again try to use different search as well, right? So for example, you can try to look so result status, you can see the result status as 303, which is basically signaling the redirect. We also look at URI. We talk about the content management system this particular website is using, which is nothing but as you can see Joomla. Okay. Okay, so what do we know? I think now we have found some of the information. I think some of the information is already found. So I think we know that the brute force attempts are being made from the IP address, which you can see in the PowerPoint slide. Then we have successfully identified what is the correct password, right? We also identified once the password has already been compromised, the login credentials are compromised already, then we do see the same very password or same very credentials are being used by the external IP address that is different from the host which we have seen. For example, if I go back to the screen once again, you can see these are the two IP addresses. So potentially the second IP address is it has now the attacker is in the possession of the compromised user credentials and is trying to make the successful request at the destination IP. So so all the information which we have gathered or what we have collected as an indicator of attacks from our SIM platform, we are documenting under the phase exploitation. We'll go back. Now we need to go further because I think so. Now what we are trying to look into, right? So we are trying to. So now we know that the credentials are already compromised, right? What else? Identifying the executable uploaded. We'll be looking at again stream data. We'll be looking at suricata as well. We will try to look at the source again, from which the executable file is passed on, right? we will also be trying to determine the hash of the uploaded file as well, right? So let's see how will we do it, right? Yes, I think we can talk about this particular slide, after some time, right? So I think we talk about, so we already know that the password is already compromised, and then we are trying to look at, whether any kind of the executables already, right? So we are looking at the stream data, right? So if I So I'm looking at the file, right? So first of all, I will be looking at the destination IP once again. We already know the destination IP, so that's not a problem. Just give me a sec. Sorry about that. Yeah, so where were we? So we are basically trying to look at the destination IP again. So if I destination IP, yeah, so we already know this is a destination IP, so we can look at this particular destination IP once again. I will be mentioning result dot dist. Okay, so now we are also looking at, so for example, so we wanted to find out the source IP once again. So again, we can see where this particular executable is coming from, right? So the executable is getting uploaded from the source IP, which you can make a note of this IP address. But we already made a note of this particular IP address. So we have documented that, and yeah. So just a sec. Yeah, so we are trying to, again, we are trying to, so we already explicitly mentioned the destination IP address, and we are also trying to search the any kind of the executable files. Then what happens is, let's say we are trying to see what is the executable file that is basically coming into question, right? So this particular field is already added as one of the selected fields. So if I scroll up, so if I see, you can see that, this is the executable file. So let me make a note of this particular executable file as well. So this is the very executable file. And I will go back to the slide again. So we have found the very executable file as well. And now, we can also try to look what we can see in our, IDS logs as well. I think we should be able to see this particular file once again, and we can validate that we found the same kind of information in both of our data sources. So again, I think we have already identified the source IP, right? So for example, so when we explicitly mention this particular executable file, we already identified the source IP address where the request is coming from. Now what we want to do is, now we know the request is coming from which particular external IP address. We also know what is the executable file that attacker is trying to make use of. So we are basically, what we want is, we want to determine the hash of the same file, right? So let us try to do that. So I've already made a note of this particular file, right? So our stream data might not be having the hash related information, and probably, our IDS logs might not have that kind of information as well, right? So first of all, we will make a search, and we just wanted to ascertain what is the source that is basically getting capturing this very executable file. So if I click on this, you can see that, so I think you have this particular executable file getting captured in Suricata logs, your IDS logs, and your stream logs. Apart from that, you have some of the information getting captured in your sysmon logs as well, right? So sysmon logs is one of the data source where you can have that information. What is the hash of the file which is in question as of now. So let me make a note of this very source type. So I'm going to make a use of this. Source type is equal to let me enclose in double quotes, should be better. So again, I think we have found some of the results. So let's try to explore some of the fields which we could see as of now. Just a sec. Yeah, so we'll be looking at our command line. If you can see that the very executable is getting captured here. If you can look at the parent command line again, we can see this malicious executable. If I look at the signature, you can see these are the processes which probably might be running or in our Windows system, right? So, for example, you can see the process creation, you can see the network connection, you can see the process terminate as well, right? So, and this is our source type, right? So, command line event description is again same. So, what I want is so, for example, if I would say I would want to look explicitly at the logs which has okay, this is fine. A result dot command line, right? So if I make a use of this, we'll potentially have okay. So now we have only one event. Okay, so you can see the process is getting created. So our aim is to basically find the hash of this particular file, right? So for example, you can definitely, so you can see that the hash. So for example, let's capture md5 as of now. So this is the md5, this is the hash you can capture from the sysmon as your data source, right? So we have captured this information, what we are looking at as of now. Go back to the slide again. So we have successfully found or ascertained the hash of the corresponding executable. So I think we this is what we were trying to look at. What is the information that we found in our sysmon logs, right? So we looked at there are certain processes like process creation. There is a process like network connection. We also look at the parent command line and command line. I think these particular two fields are very very important. You can also always make a use just to make sure that what particular process is creating, what are these child processes are getting created from the parent processes, right? So you will find some of the native Windows processes, but at the same time you might just find the hints which are leading to something is not a very right in your environment, right? So apart from that, we also attempted to look at the hash of the very executable file as well, right? So this is how we unveil that very information which is there in the sysmon logs. Yeah, you can basically make a use of this very search in order to yeah. So what have we got here? So now I think so we looked at we documented some of the information in the reconnaissance phase when we were talking about the brute force attempts. We looked at the exploitation phase in the cyber kill chain for that matter, and then we have also got some information with respect to what is the executable file that is coming in question and what is the corresponding hash with respect to that very executable. So we categorize this very phase under the installation, right? Documented the information for the same as well, right? So this is a time for us to move on to the subsequent phases. So talking about how does the picture look like, I think we have seen, the reconnaissance phase where one of the external IP is trying to scan our website. We have gotten the hint that attacker is basically making use of a QNetX, which is nothing but the web application security scanner. Uh, Post that. So once it has gathered certain amount of the information, we also see the brute force attempts being made from one of the external IP, which you can see on the left hand side of the slide, right? And then we also look at, that attempt was successful. We looked at what is the correct password, and subsequently we do see attacker is basically logging into that particular website, making the use of compromised login credentials and uploading some of the executable files to that particular destination IP. Also documented that particular destination IP address as well, right? Then we went further. We have identified what is the executable file that has already gotten executed in our host in the installation phase, and we also try to document what is the hash or MD5 hash corresponding to that very file, right? So this is how does the picture look like, or continue to evolve. So now we are going further. What is the file? We are trying to identify what is the file that basically led to a defacement of our organization website, right? So some possible hints. We'll be looking at some of the data sources again, which is Surikata and probably our stream data as well. We will determine what are the IP addresses in picture. We will also try to look at the directional flow as well. So already know this is the destination IP. So just give me a sec. Yeah, sorry about that. So looking at the directional flow once again. We'll take through what we are saying here, right? So again, we have already documented the hash information. So we would like to make a use of yeah. So just going back to the slide once again. So I think we were saying is we will basically be looking at Surikata IDS logs, also be looking at stream logs. So I think we already captured some of the external IP addresses. Okay, so already know that this is the URL. URL is basically saying that this is the content management system or things of that sort. Yeah, so I will go back to the I will go back to the console once again, and so we will be looking at result dot stream HTTP. Sorry, I think. Yeah, so this is the source type. We will be mentioning the destination IP as well. So just give me a sec. I think we already have the copy of that. Okay, and just result dot. Yeah, so let us look into this. I think we have already identified the source, when we saw that very executable file, right? We'll be looking at that information once again. So if I look at the source IP, you can see these are the source IPs, right? So currently we are basically trying to look at some of the files, right? Okay, so that information we'll be looking at So just give me a sec. Yeah, so I think so. First of all, the very important question that might come to our mind is, so this is our web server, right? So you can see the destination IP. The destination IP is corresponding to the website that was hosted and that has already been defaced, right? So the very first questions, some of the important questions that we might want to ask ourselves is, so obviously for the website, we will see most of the communication will be inbound, right? And our website or our host will be responding to that very request, right? But however, if we see the outbound request, from very web server, right? So we would want to look into that information, what kind of the traffic that might flow in the outbound direction from our web server, right? This is what we are looking at, right? So we are also looking at some of the URI fields. So anyways, we are going to talk. We are again going to get back to the console so we are basically trying to look what is the file that has basically defaced our website altogether, right? So we are trying to ascertain that very information, right? So again, I think we have already mentioned our destination IP address. We can also mention the source IP. Let's say this is the source IP. So where is our source IP? We already know that this information. Okay. So now we'll be looking at the URI, what it has to say. Okay, so so either one of them, right? So let's make a use of or. And let's try to see what we have got so far. Again, we are scrolling down and we are interested in looking at. So currently not able to find the information what we are looking for, right? So yeah, so I think we can go back to the console once again. So I think the important part of the thing is we are basically trying to look at the outbound request that is being made from the very web server, right? And we are explicitly mentioning the destination IP address, which is not correct, right? So let us change this to the source IP. Hopefully now we are able to see some of the hints. Okay, so you can see that when we were mentioning the destination IP, you can see obviously this is a web server, right? So there are many requests that is basically being made to one of the web server, right? But uh, again, mentioning the very same thing, if the traffic flows in the outbound direction, we want to look at it whether it is interesting or not. So again, we see the 7 events, and hopefully those are some of the interesting events. So we'll be looking at the URI information once again. So I will be scrolling down in order to find the URI field. So here is it. So can you see this particular thing, right? So I think this is one of the hints that has already been left out by the attacker, right? When we are trying to navigate to the website, I think we have seen the name of that very APT group, right? So obviously in this particular data set, the file is named like that, but probably he might not name the file, which might be seeing very, very similar to that APT name, right? So I think we have gotten the answer, so I think this is one of the file you have seen that this is the request from our web server being made to the attacker's website, or to the attacker's host name, and potentially the site is getting defaced, right? So let's what we can do is we can basically record this information, and we will record this information in one of the phases of our kill chain. Okay, so let's move back to our slides. So I think we have found some of the information, and okay, so now I think we have found, or we have unveiled very important information. But at the same time, can we also look at the firewall logs? What it has to say, right? What it has captured so far, right? Okay, so I will be changing the source here. And I will also be mentioning the destination IP as well, right? Okay, so let's see what we have got from here, right? So okay, not should not see here as of now. So I think these are the firewall logs. So I think we should be interested in seeing the category, how the categorization is happening. So you can see that obviously we have found some of the information in this particular field, but normally because the logs are humongous, right, you might not find this very detail in the field name, because it will only show the top 5 or top 10 fields when you point to one particular field, right? So in this particular scenarios, your rare command will be very helpful, right? So you can see information technology, you can see unrated sites which are unrated, right? And you can also see the sites which are malicious, right? You can see web vulnerability scanner as well. So this particular source type is doing good categorization of the websites, which is giving us very important information, right? So let's make a use of this. So we'll be making the use of the category. Double quotes. Let's see what we have found here, right? So we have seen 3 events here. So we'll be looking at some of the fields. You can see obviously we have categorized from that. So in the very first log, if you look at, we have found again, we have found the file path is this one, right? So obviously you can make a use of so you should be able to see that particular field, or if not, I think should be having that field. Yes, so I think again you can find the same information in the field as well, right? So again, in our firewall data also, we can see that what is the file that is basically leads to the defacement of the website as well. So we have captured this particular information altogether. So let us go back to the slide once again and see, what are the other questions, or what are the other things we want to look at. So this is just again, I think we talked about. So in the second SPL query, right? It's basically you can see the inbound traffic, right? So obviously since it is a web server, you will see the high amount of the inbound traffic, right? But at the same time, if you are able to see the outbound traffic from the very web server, right, it looks suspicious, it looks interesting, and that is what we looked at as of now, right? So I think we looked at the website categorization, and so as I said before, your rare command will be the go-to command if you really want to uncover this kind of information, because in the enterprise setup, the logs are humongous. You might not see in the fields, you might not see the way, you will only be able to see the categorization for most of the websites, right? So information technology and other things. So for the websites which are malicious in nature, you might want to make a use of the rare command, because these kind of the things you might because it's again the scenario of the needle in the haystack, right? So rare command is your go-to command. We looked at the file path. I think the same kind of the information is getting captured in both the sources. We found in the stream data, we also found in the firewall logs, and we also looked at the Suricata or IDS logs for that matter. So what have we got here? Sorry. So I think we have covered what has basically which particular file has led to the defacement of the site, and you can see that kind of the information we have explicitly mentioned at the very right hand side of the slide in the action on objectives, right? So this is how the APT picture evolves over time. So we are documenting the same. I think we have seen the executable that is uploaded to this particular website, and subsequently we have seen that the web server is basically making a request to the one of the host or one of the hosts which is owned by the attacker, right? And one particular file we have already looked at that is basically led to the defacement of the website, right? Yeah, so I think the another information which we want to know is, so can we also know what is the fully qualified domain name of the source IP addresses our website or our web server is talking to, right? So again, I think this particular slide is basically giving us hint. I think we will find the same information. We'll find the same information in the firewall logs. Let's continue to look at that, and I think we might be able to uncover that information as well. So I've been scrolling down. So yeah, so if you click on the host name, right, you can see that this is the information. So let's also capture this information, right? So we have successfully recorded this information as well. If I go back to the slide once again, you can again see that information, right? So I think that information is already available in the URI field, and I also looked at the host name field. So that's what I think. So one can basically make a use of the firewall logs, just to get to know what is the fully qualified domain name with respect to that particular IP address from which the web server is basically talking to. So I think we already looked at the firewall data, right? So we can also have this very information in our DNS logs as well, right? So that is what this particular slide is basically depicting, right? If you do not, for that matter, if you do not, so the same information can be ascertained from the various other sources or various other ways as well. That's what we are trying to see. We are trying to see in this particular slide, right? So we find that information in our DNS logs as well, right? So if you see the IP address and you can see the so if you again look at the kill chain here for that matter, right? So I think you can see that we have also uncovered the fully qualified domain name as well. So this is how the kill chain looks like as of now. I think we are at the very end of this particular workshop or demonstration, right? So if you also talk about the weaponization and delivery as a phase, right? So if you find some of the external IP address which is basically making a request to your environment, right? We always basically look into the who is lookup sites, right? For example, domain tools or the other websites, right? So what is the host name that is basically related to that particular website? What is the so we basically try to make a check at the IP reputation check, right? So what are the domain names or what are the categorizations available for that particular website? So same kind of information can be that is definitely outside the scope of this very demonstration, but I would like to show that if you were to basically make a use of the who is lookup sites, what you can unveil from that, right? So this is the entire picture. This is how the APT picture looks like when you have uncovered all the information, and we have already classified that information into the various phases of the kill chain. So this is the final APT picture, which looks like this. And this is the final final slide, which basically looks at, so I was talking about weaponization as a phase. So if you try to look up against the IP address, we saw that one of the IP addresses basically scanning our website. The second IP address, which is basically was able to successfully brute force and able to compromise the login credentials. So when you look up against those particular IP addresses, you can see that those are the domains, malicious looking domains, and you can see that they have done the they have intentionally made this particular websites look same to our organization website, right, which is a fictional company in our case. And similarly, you can also make a use of another open source information or open source intelligence, uh, for that matter. So we can basically make a use of so we already uncovered, we have already identified the what is the MD5 hash with respect to the executables. So we can look into some of the other, we can look at the OSINT, in order to uncover some other information as well, right? So this basically concludes our video, and hopefully you like it. And just let me know in the comment section, what do you think about this video. Thank you.